always, eyes on Jesus. Let's talk about it. Jesus coffee. So I want to go through a passage in Matthew 14. Heard a great message and kind of wanted to touch on it. This gentleman named Keenan Clark brought up a great point and something I've never really thought about before when it comes to this passage. So this passage that we're going to go through is, to give you context, in Matthew 14, this is when Peter steps out on the water and walks on the water with Jesus. And there's some things I kind of want to touch on in this passage. Things I just want to kind of highlight. And, how it pertains to our life and how it relates to us. So I'm going to go over the passage. It's verses 22 through 33. And then just kind of go through it. Just want to get that glare off my glasses from my laptop. So immediately, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side. So they were going out on the water from Galilee. He had sent the multitudes away. So this is this is far post, actually, Sermon on the Mount. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. Now when the evening came, he was alone there. But the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by waves, for the wind was contrary. So the wind was ugly. Storm had come in. Now in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them, walking onto the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, "It was a ghost." And they cried out for fear. But Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Be of good cheer. It is I. Do not be afraid." And Peter answered him and said, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." Peter said, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come out on the water." Had his eyes on Christ. So he said, "Come." And Peter had come out of the boat. He walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid and began to sink. He cried out, saying, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when you got into the boat, the wind ceased. Then those who were in the boat came and worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." So, one thing I want you to pick up in this passage is Peter had his eyes on Jesus. And Peter requested to step out on the water. It wasn't Jesus that told him to come. Peter actually requested and said, if it is you, Jesus, command me to come out on the water. So, in essence, that was Peter's prayer request. It was, "Lord, if it's you, call me out." Had his eyes on Jesus for the prayer. Jesus said, "Come," answered prayer, answered that request. And Peter took some steps, started to walk. But when he looked around and took his eyes off of Jesus, what happened? He sank. And that's the powerful imagery you have there's a very, very famous painting out there, very famous picture of Jesus' hand reaching down into the water. You don't know who's on the other side. Obviously, the imagery there is, doesn't matter where you're going through. When you feel like you're drowning, Jesus is there to pull you out. So when we keep our eyes on Jesus through our prayers, when those prayers get answered, don't do what Peter did and pull your eyes off of Jesus. Peter started to look around, started to look at his circumstances. Didn't keep his eyes focused on the giver, on the one who answered that prayer. Had he kept his eyes on him, he probably would have walked all the way to Jesus. But he didn't. He got his prayer answered and took his eyes off of him. Started to look around. What do we do? Excuse me. I got my prayer answered. What am I doing now? Sunk. We have to keep our eyes on the cross. You know, we talked about earlier this week, we talked about going through and running the race, right? We talked about running the race and not being encumbered when we run the race. Talking about out of Hebrews 12. Well, I'm going to go into verse 2 in Hebrews 12 really quick. And I want to go through that. Because it talks about that very thing. When we get into Hebrews 12 and we get to verse 2, it talks about that very thing that we're talking about. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. So, to bring all of that together, I'm going to read verses 1 and 2 again. So therefore also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside each weight. So we talked about laying aside those encumbrances, right? Those enslaving sins, right? Those things that ensnare us and trip us up. And the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. So Jesus is the only one that can get us in the race, right? When we are no longer separated from him, but we're reconciled to a life to him, he's the only one that can get us in that race. And he's the only one that can get us to the finish line, because we keep our eyes on Jesus. The author of Hebrews says it. Matthew says it. We keep our eyes on Jesus. Right? So when you're in those prayers, asking for that relationship, or if you're newly meeting somebody, praying them away. Yes, I said praying them away. When you're new in a relationship, one thing I did when I started dating in my faith was I would pray that individual away. I would ask God, if this is not the one you want me with, take them away, Lord. So that way it's your will be done, not mine. I'm not seeing the attributes in this person because I want a relationship. I'm not seeing attributes that aren't there. I'm not seeing things that aren't there. Or should I say, I'm not seeing the red flags that are there because I'm not looking for them. So pray them away. But we keep our eyes on Jesus. We don't take our eyes off of him. The world wants to distract you. The world wants you to take your eyes off of the cross. Don't take your eyes off the cross. What's a very big saying in sports? Keep your eyes on the prize, right? Well, keep your eyes on the prize. He's the prize. He's the treasure. He's the prize. It's the only treasure we can ever need. Keep your eyes on him. Don't take your eyes off, because you'll miss what he has. And you'll drown. Don't do what Peter did and drowned. Well, Peter didn't drown. Jesus obviously saved him, but he sunk. Don't sink. When we take our eyes off of the cross, we can tend to sink into our problems. We can tend to sink in the things of the world. They can trip us up and snare us, and we can't run the race with endurance. Yes, you see in the connection? Endurance comes from keeping our eyes on Jesus. It takes endurance to not take your eyes off of him. Because we can look around at the world and go, you see all the stuff that's happening around me? This is crazy. There's Jesus to bail us out. Because we look to him. Because we get sunk. What did Peter do? Peter cried out to Jesus. Oh, I'm sinking. Save me, Lord. You're sinking because you took your eyes off of him in the first place. Yes. It's so beautiful when we can learn from each other's mistakes, shortcomings. And Peter made a mistake and took his eyes off of Jesus, and noted in Matthew 14. And we get to learn from that. Don't take our eyes off of the cross. Don't take our eyes off of Jesus. He is the author and finisher of our faith. So the author starts writing the book, right? So Jesus gets us in the race. And he's the finisher of our faith. So he finishes our story. He's the author and finisher of our faith. Keep your eyes off. So I love you guys. I know he loves you like crazy. I'm going to shift right over and do New Morning Mercies. I didn't do it yesterday. Life happened. Busy day yesterday. So I love you guys. He loves you like crazy. We'll be back tomorrow with whatever Dad wants to talk about. Day 3 of new job. First day flying solo today. No substitute in there with me. I'll be flying solo. So love you guys. Prayers.